We back, baby. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now so that you don't miss a thing. You are now tuned into the system behind the system. Welcome back to the DaVinci podcast. And on today's episode, we are going to cover probably what is one of my favorite topics when it comes to the human body and biology, and that is the topic of fascia. Yup, on a regular basis, I get the question, so Neo, what is this fascia matrix thing that you talk about all the time? So today I'm going to open up the floodgates and we're going to discuss everything fascia related, from what it is to its role in the body and biology to how it functions when it comes to movement, how to train it. I mean, you name it. So buckle up your seatbelts and get ready for the fascia download. So since the very beginning of this entire journey that I've been on in learning as much as I can about health and wellness, the goal has been to crack the code on the human body. I've started with the most simplest topics, advanced from there, and touched on just about everything there is, somewhat at some level. And then it led me to fascia and the fascia matrix, which kind of connected it and brought it all together. That's what it does. It's the connective tissue that turns every system into one functioning system. It connects the entire system. It's the structural, the substrate component of it all. So when I stumbled upon fascia, it easily became my favorite topic because I was able to bring it all together and then learn everything as one whole instead of in pieces. So the first thing we need to discuss is, what is fascia? Simply put, fascia is the collagen-based connective tissue in the body. It connects all the other tissues together. And you can think of that as the in-between spaces in the body, they're filled with fascia. So from one bone to another, they're connected together by fascia. You actually take a muscle fiber and it's wrapped in fascia. And then if you take multiple of those fascia-wrapped muscle fibers and put those together, those are also wrapped in fascia. And then you take a couple of those bundles of fascia-wrapped muscle fibers and put several of those together, those are wrapped in fascia, all the way up until you have the entire muscle belly. So at the very smallest point, up, or the micro up to the macro, fascia is wrapping and engulfing every part of our tissues, all throughout the organs, from the skeletal system to the muscular system, the nervous system, digestive system, and it actually facilitates communication between the system. Fascia is the most sensory rich system in the body, and that's how it facilitates that communication between systems. There's a brain to gut connection, right? And we know this, right? People talk about that, the gut to brain connection or brain to gut connection. The reason why there's a gut to brain connection is because of fascia. If there wasn't fascia, there would be no connection between the gut and the brain. Fascia is the connective tissue that links everything together, and it's been disregarded for quite some time because anatomists, they would, do their dissections and they would kind of toss the connective tissue away because it didn't look that interesting, in a cadaver. And they would get to like the heart, the lungs, the brain, the muscles, the bones. Those were much more interesting in dissection. But in a live body, fascia is very important. And we're realizing that this has been the Cinderella of the body, the glass slipper of the entire human anatomy. It's super important and it's responsible for so much. that we didn't even know until we had the technology to study it, which we now do. Researchers are now regarding fascia and the entire fascia system as a key vital system in the body when it comes to pain management, movement, biomechanics, and science and biology as a whole. I mean, when you have a system that contains 6 to 10 times more sensory nerve endings than muscle, I would say is probably pretty important, and we need to pay attention to it in every aspect that involves the human body. It's because of fascia that the body is integrated as one whole structure. You know, you might have a muscle in the leg which seems separate from a muscle in the arm. But when you realize that fascia tissue has connected that muscle in the arm to the muscle in the leg, they're not disconnected. And there are no disconnections in the body. Like in a car factory, you have thousands of parts on an assembly line, and it starts with all the unassembled parts, and then through the assembly line you have the car at the end. But there's tons of parts you have to put together. You don't do that with the body. There's only one part. There's only one part, and it's already fully assembled. Like there is no disconnections. There are no separate pieces. Everything is one functioning piece. And fascia reminds us that it is one functioning piece. We've separated things out into multiple different systems so that we can understand it and study it and see how the system kind of works in this manner and in this manner. But then fascia comes along and reminds us that this is one system with multiple different aspects working and functioning together, not separate parts, pieces, or separate systems. So there's 3 different types of fascia. You have superficial fascia, you have deep fascia, and then you have visceral fascia. The superficial fascia is, you can think of that like the surface level fascia. It's right kind of under the skin. It's the first level of fascia. And then the next level is the deep fascia. The deep fascia is exactly what it is. It's the deeper fascia. That's the fascia that surrounds muscles, bones, joints, and all the structural components of the body. So it's like the structural type of fascia. It's the fascia that runs in the inner deep pathways throughout the body and is responsible for our posture, right? And if we can get adaptations and changes there, that's where we're talking structural change, postural change, and that's the tissue that we typically try to affect when we're trying to make those types of changes. Superficial fascia obviously plays a role too because it's all interconnected, and so does visceral fascia, but the main structural fascia is the deep fascia. Now, the visceral fascia, simply put, is the fascia that surrounds all the visceral organs. That's your heart, lungs, brain, you name it, all of it. It kind of suspends those important organs in the body and facilitates their function through movement and everything else that goes on. So those are the 3 types of fascia. You have the superficial fascia, deep fascia, and the visceral fascia. They kind of have separate roles, but it intertwines and overlaps in between, right? But those are their main roles. Now, fascia as a whole is the architectural tissue in the body, because as everything sits in this continuous web, it allows for mobility, flexibility, structural stability, and so on and so forth, but it works together with all of that stuff. So it kind of has a role in all the systems. It's the system's system. which leads me to the topic of biotensegrity. Biotensegrity is an emerging science that describes how the human body is structured and how that structure maintains its structure, right? And how it does that is through tension and compression forces working and interacting together. The fascia system is sort of the center point of that biotensegrity system or matrix. We say fascia matrix, but really it's the biotensegrity matrix because fascia is a component within the broader biotensegrity matrix, which includes all the tissues in the body and all the structural parts of the body. Fascia is the main structural part, but muscles play a role, bones play a role, and so does the heart and the nervous system. Now, we used to look at the human body as separate muscles, separate bones, and different classifications, and that's very useful, again, for pinpointing with precision where things are in the body. Like if I asked you to point to the tibia bone, you know exactly where to go, right? Or the clavicle, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Or the bicep, right? You know where that's at. Tricep, deltoid, so on and so forth. But knowing that everything is connected in this fascia-driven biotensegrity matrix, we now look at the body much differently from an anatomy standpoint. And that leads us to start to see the fascia lines. There's 12 myofascial meridians that are a connective kind of anatomy train running through the body, and they determine force transmission from top to bottom, left to right, laterally, spirally, and there's 12 of them. For instance, like the superficial back line runs from the feet all the way up through to the top of the head, and it's a connective highway of muscles, tissues, bones, fascia that connect together and have a certain purpose or function. Not forgetting that everything is one functioning system, but we look at it now from a more holistic viewpoint versus localized and pinpointed viewpoint. These myofascial meridians are responsible for a lot of different things in the body, especially force transmission and load distribution, which we can kind of pinpoint the issue now when it comes to like pain and help with pain management. For instance, if you have hip pain, it could be that your spiral line has too much tension and we need to release that tension, or some of the parts and areas in that spiral line has too many adhesions and is creating blockages leading to compensations, which causes pain in the hips. So we release that line, unlock the adhesions that are in there, and we can kind of restore normal function in the hips. And we use these lines to show us how that leg muscle is directly connected to the arm muscle through the fascia meridians, the 12 fascial lines. And there's also fascial slings, which are kind of direct connective structures across multiple areas that propel movement like running, throwing, jumping, and sort of are like a on-ramp for force transmission. You can really hone and train those fascial slings, and knowing what they are and how they function, you can develop them and increase and enhance your ability in different movements. And they function as clusters of force transmission areas that help keep our movement coordinated and stable while we're being mobile, while we're doing any type of movement. And there's multiple of them, like the posterior sling, right? And so on and so forth. But they're also a very important part in seeing how the body is interconnected. Fascia is responsible for our posture. Now, the reason why is because a lot of the tension in the body is held in fascia. And if there's too much tension in one area, it can literally pull our posture out of alignment. If there's not enough tension, though, we're out of alignment as well. So you can kind of master and manipulate and work the different tension areas of the body, like the posterior sling and the fascial slings all together, as well as the myofascial meridians. You can use different tools such as myofascial release tools and different training modalities. Lifting is one of them to correct and change the posture of the human body by balancing and working with the tensional network, which is fascia. Now, we do this to maintain balance in our posture, but it's also heavily influencing the force transmission of the body. And what I mean by that is when you go to push, like the amount of force that you're capable of pushing, you can have strong muscles, but if there's not that connection happening from the leg through the core to the arm, that amount of force can be limited. So that tensional network, if it's not communicating properly through the myofascial meridians and those fascial slings, you can actually inhibit your body's capability, maximal capability of force transmission, and even lead to pain. We can clean that up simply by rebalancing the tension, working on those myofascial meridians, restoring proper force transmission, and you don't have to work as hard. It's more efficient. And you know I love efficiency. And so the fascia system has just been exactly where I was leading the whole time. It is the center part of it all. And that's why we've made it the center part of how we train in the DaVinci Center, because the way I see it, if you train fascia, you're training all the systems simultaneously by default. I love it. And speaking of efficiency and force transmission, there's another property that fascia has called elasticity. And elasticity is simply it's like that rubber band. You pull the rubber band apart and it stores kinetic energy, and then you let it go, and it's like easier for lots of force to be applied. Like, it's not hard to pull it back, but when you let it go, it's elastic, and it can actually apply a lot of amount of force with little effort. So it's more efficient. The fascia tissue is where all that elasticity in the body happens. Think of like a kangaroo. They can jump and hop for miles. How? Without getting tired. How? Like, it's because their fascia system in that movement has been highly developed, and they're calling upon not their muscles to do that, because they would tire out very quickly. Muscle is super expensive when it comes to energy, and so that's you burn out. You'll burn out quickly if you're doing straight muscle dominant, and if that was muscle dominant work. But it's not. It's fascia dominant work, and it acts kind of like a spring motion. And the spring, just like a spring, you push down on it and then let go, and it pops up, and it has this propulsion of force. And that is the elastic capability that fascia has. You can train that too. And why I like training it, and why I train it with a lot of our people and our members, is because it makes their movement more efficient. When they take a step and pop up and bounce into the next step and then the next step, or when they're running or any movement that they're doing, that elastic capability kicks in, and they're more efficient in their energy consumption when they're moving. So when that elastic uh, function works in fascia, it's more efficient. They're using less energy. Plus, they are producing more force than if they were just straight muscle dominant or if that elastic part wasn't developed for them. Fascia thrives when you're training it in multiple directions. Now, traditionally, when we exercise, we're only moving in one direction, and we call that the sagittal plane, right? There's three dimensions, 3D movement, and there's the sagittal plane, the frontal plane, and then the transverse plane, and that covers all directions of the 3D world that we live in, right? Well, fascia thrives off of moving in all planes of motion, not just the sagittal plane. If you think of squats, bench presses, deadlifts, rows, all the lateral raises, typically we would just do a set in just that frontal plane, or a set in just that. Most of them are sagittal plane movements. And then rarely do we do a transverse plane movement, which is that rotation. Now, the fascia system needs to be trained in all directions. We call that omnidirectional movement. And I add to that by saying multiplanar, ultra dynamic, omnidirectional movement. Pretty much saying utilize all capabilities and possibilities of movement when you're training, and you will train a highly developed fascia system. Because the fascia system distributes load throughout the entire body all at once, you want to train in this way, and it'll stop your body from developing restrictions and kind of build up like knots, what we call adhesions, because repetitive movement over and over and over, and if we're just working in one plane, which like I said, usually a lot of the exercises are just in the sagittal plane, that will actually begin to develop restrictions, and our body isn't trained to move in multiple directions. So if we're only trained to move in one direction and in one way, and that makes us limited, what happens when we go to do other movements with our body? Our body's not ready for it. We're not trained. We haven't actually moved in those directions. And we're good in one direction, but that's why we need to be multi-directional. And fascia loves this because fascia is also multi-directional. Muscles tend to work along, a little more stricter lines and directions, and that's a little different, but fascia is very dynamic. And so we got to train it dynamically. It also has a plasticity and collagen remodeling property. There goes that word collagen again, right? Collagen is that structural protein inside the body, mostly inside fascia, and it's highly moldable and plastic-like, meaning just like plastic, we can easily shape it and mold it into what we'd like, right? Fascia has those types of properties as well. So through different mechanical forces that we put on the fascial tissue, it will actually begin to reorganize and take different shape and remodel through the collagen proteins that are inside of it. It's pretty cool. So you can shape your fascia system based on the training that you're doing. And not just the training, but any of the stimulus that we put on and provide to the fascia system will alter its plasticity and its shape and its structure. It is responding to everything that we feed it in a way. Even myofascial release. And myofascial release is one of the hottest modalities right now. All right, because we all know about weightlifting and, strength and cardio and all that good stuff. But myofascial release is one of the missing keys, if you ask me, in the fitness industry right now and in body work as a whole. There's a lot of people out there doing it, but not enough. What myofascial release is, myo means muscle, fascial means fascia, and you're just releasing that intertwined network of muscle and fascia to restore the body's natural balance structurally or texturally. You take like a tennis ball. I personally like the tennis ball out of all the tools. It's just the most versatile for me. It's easy, it's workable. You can use it with mostly everybody. Now, there's a lot of other tools. We use lacrosse balls, Theracanes, gum drops. You got the tiger tail. A lot of people like the tiger tail. It's like the fascia roller. And you take these tools and you apply a pushing force on them, and that begins shaping them and changing them and rebalancing the tension. There's a whole system behind it in a way where if you know where to place the tool for the amount of time with the right amount of pressure, and then follow that up with the right next location, right amount of pressure, right amount of time, and work your way through different parts of the body, head to toe, back to front, left to right, following the myofascial meridians and the fascial slings, you can unlock your body's posture and tension will balance, restoring proper function, posture, pain, relieving pain, and restoring injury resiliency as well. So you're probably wondering, Neo, how is it that I can just like push into my quadricep area and it's going to remodel my body's architecture? Well, there's these cells called fibroblasts, first and foremost, that when we apply stimulus in any way, whether it's load through holding a weight and doing the right omnidirectional movement, in a certain pace, in a certain manner, right? Or pushing into the tissue through myofascial release. And mind you, there's also myofascial cupping. Myofascial cupping is like the pull, and myofascial release is like the push. So you have a push and a pull on the tissue, all while you're just working the fascia, the highly adaptable fascia tissue. So they're kind of like the left and right, up and down. They're opposites, push and pull. But no matter what type of stimulus you're applying to fascia, those fibroblast cells will activate and start to do certain types of function. They're like the maintenance men of the fascia system. So they're responsible for laying down new fibers, and the types of stimuli that we apply tell those fibroblasts how to lay down those fibers, where to lay down those fibers, how many to lay down, in which direction. They're also responsible for removing old fascia tissue. So they're gonna lay down new fibers, remove old fibers. That's how you're changing the architecture of your tissue. They're also helpful for removing adhesions and tissue buildup and scar tissue. And we know scars on the outside of the body, right? I have one right here. And scar tissue is it's there, right? It's a change in the tissue. But we have scar tissue internally in our body as well. And we know this because when we exercise, it causes micro tears, and then those tears obviously heal, and that's scar tissue. It's a real internal tear. And they're not detrimental, and it's not highly bad. But if we're not doing certain types of restorative modalities, such as myofascial release, getting enough rest, eating a healthy diet, all the restoration stuff, our body will actually begin building up scar tissue and adhesions and kind of too much tissue in one area, which forms blockages And then that's where the restrictions start to come in, the compensations, the overload of tension. And those fibroblast cells in those areas aren't as active, right? They're kind of stuck and you got to wake them back up. And sometimes it just takes putting a lacrosse ball on the quad to get that moving again. We call that breaking up the knots, and restoring hydration to that area too. So hydration, keeping the fascia system hydrated, is one of the best things that you can do when it comes to fascia. It is mostly water and collagen, as well as other, materials, but the majority of it's water and collagen. So staying hydrated and fascia hydration is by far one of the most important things that we need to focus on when it comes to fascia. And I'm not just talking drinking water though. Like you can drink water and it not be absorbed in the body fully. A lot of it just gets flushed out as well. But a way that you can get your body to absorb that water that you drink is by doing myofascial release. It kind of acts as a sponge. So when you push into the tissue and then hold it for 2 minutes and release, one, you wake up the fibroblast cells and they do the maintenance work and they do more than what I just listed, but those are kind of the important ones off top. But you also cause the tissue to absorb and draw in some of the outer liquid and fluid that's outside of the tissue. And then it goes into the tissue. All right, now before we wrap up this fascia download, I want to talk about something that's newly being researched and developed and understood, and that's the interstitium. Now, this is kind of part of the fascia network and the fascia system, and it has a very important role. It's one of the hottest topics that are being talked about when it comes to fascia right now, the interstitial fluid. And what this is it's kind of like pockets within fascia that contain fluid and water, but it moves throughout the tissue and it also moves in between tissues like the lymphatic system and the digestive system and the nervous system and muscle. So not only is this important for fluid transport, but it also helps with shock absorption during movement, which is pretty cool. And I think most importantly, what we're going to see as far as research goes with this function or this part of the fascia system is some researchers are saying that it actually is involved in the movement of disease spread. So if we're trying to combat diseases like cancer, we're going to be looking at this interstitium and interstitial fluid as a way to prevent the spread of disease. And that's in fascia. So fascia is going to play a very big role in the future here when it comes to science, biology, and I don't just mean fitness, but in other industries like the medical industry as well. Who would have known fascia making its way through movement science, rehabilitation and pain management, and even medicine? That's right. It's here to stay, I'd have to say. It's making its way through all the industries, and it's not going anywhere. You just got yourself a download, and the future of fascia, you will see it kind of develop new ways of treating the body, looking at movement, and just looking at biology as a whole. Wow, that's crazy. So while we're on the topic of fascia, I want to introduce you to 3 International's collagen product. It is a top-notch liquid collagen product, probably the best on the market right now. So there's a lot of different options out there, but did you know that most of the stuff that you drink actually never reaches your cells? That's because it's not bioavailable. So it's not fully absorbed. And if it's not fully absorbed and it just passes through, then it's just expensive water. But that's where Three International's collagen changes the game. What sets it apart isn't just what's in it, but how it's made. They use hydrolyzed and micronized marine collagen, meaning that the particles are so tiny they can actually cross into the intestinal barrier to reach your skin, hair, nails, joints, and fascia. In fact, it's up to 7.3 times more bioavailable than standard alternatives. And it's also a high quality marine collagen. You know I'm all about that quality. So if you're ready to redefine what's possible for your skin, joints, and fascia, visit the link in the description and grab your 10-day cycle and start glowing from the inside out. Thank you for tuning in. And if you have any questions about fascia or anything we discussed here, or if you're looking for a DaVinci engineered program for yourself to get your fascia more youthful and aligned and that structure back intact, reach out to me at International DaVinci online on every single platform, and I'll respond as soon as I can to hook you up. I'll see you next week on the next episode of the DaVinci Podcast.